Welcome to the full experience, where we look at the first, ultimate, lowest, and last episode of a television series to get a full view of what that series was about. We are kicking off the Munsters this week. The full experience begins with the first episode, Munster Masquerade, which aired first September 24th, 1964. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Hey, man. So let's start by talking about just how different Hollywood used to be than it is now. You brought up, I think it was in between or maybe an after talk, the fact that there were only 2 seasons of the Munsters.
Right.
And however, they were 40 plus episodes each.
Yeah, I think like 32 episodes, 28 episodes, something like that. Yeah, they were huge.
Well, and so I did a little bit of poking around, and we've talked about the phenomenon where a lot of times there are 2 versions of a thing that comes out at the same time. In the 80s, late 80s, you had body swapping movies like Father Like Son and vice versa came out at the same time. In the late 90s, you had Armageddon and Deep Impact, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I had always assumed the Munsters was an also ran the Addams Family, but the Addams Family had the benefit of being a comic strip in a newspaper beforehand that just happened to come out the exact same year as the Munsters. But per what little research I was able to do, it's not like they one stole anything from the other. They just both seem to be at the right moment in time where people were in the mood for spooky ookies in their primetime comedies.
Yeah, it is one of those like deep impact Armageddon kind of situations on television, and I remember always enjoying the Munsters a little more than Addams Family when I was young, simply because it was a little funnier, at least to me in my teens.
It was, to be totally fair, we'd have to go back and watch the Addams Family, but
sure. But I'm just saying back then when I was a kid and they would both come on, because this watch absolutely brought back the feeling of me sitting in the rocker, drinking an iced tea at 4 p.m. in the afternoon on a weekday after I had come home from junior high and watching shows on Channel 11. I Love Lucy, The Brady Bunch, and The Munsters, among many of others.
Yeah, I guess we're gonna skip straight to all of the praise. The pacing is amazing. The casting is amazing. Fred Gwynne. I was trying to, in fact, halfway through the show, I was like, why is Fred Gwynne so funny? Is it just because he is really tall and kind of plays it straight in a weird, dumb way? I don't know. Like, I understand why Grandpa is funny because like he's hamming it up constantly, right? And I understand why I don't know, Mrs. Munster is funny because she's pretending like everything's normal when it's clearly not. And I understand why the niece is funny because she's the one actual human in the bunch. But Fred Gwynne, I'm like, why is he so funny? Why can I not stop smiling when I look at him?
I imagine it has something to do with what makes everybody else funny, which is they are subverting what was a young paradigm, right? Television had only been popular for 10 years at this point. Like the first like major network schedules came out in around 1954, 1952, 53. So we had a decade of sitcoms, and it's kind of hard for us to imagine, but sitcoms being new and folks going, I guess this is kind of like those radio shows, except you can see the people. And so we have finally got to the, like, what if it was a typical family sitcom drama with the bumbling dad and the elegant mom and the, plucky young kid, and the older daughter, except in this case, she's a niece to service the plot line. and it becomes subverted by saying, but they're all monsters and they think that's normal. They think the rest of the world is weird. And so you get all of those jokes in this episode of like, oh, it's raining out. How lovely. Or, like, go wash behind your points, to the kids. They're silly. The jokes are dumb objectively, but they're so pure that I loved it. I was enamored by all of it. Maybe it's an example of a lot of times we say, well, this was the first of its kind, but it's such a trope now, it doesn't play well. This is an example of this is the first of its kind and it still plays well because it's pure, because it's the first.
100%. And I don't even know if I would qualify it just because it's the first. It's like, there's something about the timing on everything. There's almost like a board professionalism with most of the cast. Like, you could tell they're all standard Hollywood actors. And one of my favorite parts was watching people in the background patiently, like, you can actually see them get a little bit bored and glance off left and right here and again, right?
There was one line, I think it stopped raining, where Fred Gwynn clearly missed his cue. And they were waiting for him to say his line, and he's like, "Oh, right, it's me." Yeah.
But and the opening scene where first of all, very saucy at the time, I would imagine, for 1964, they're straight up making out on the front porch, which I'm like, well, that's a bit more than I'm accustomed to expecting from that time period. And then meanwhile, like, oh, those kids, I hope they get along,
Did you notice too that there was no laugh track at the reveal of Fred Munster?
Yeah, I was dialed in on the production side of things. Obviously, the laugh track was added in post. A lot of the music was added in post.
But specifically, like, there's a laugh track on her, trying to avoid the advances of Tom. There's a laugh track on a lot of other very, like, wash behind the points of your ears, right? But the moment, this is the first episode, right? And so they're setting us up with, like, it's a typical, young woman on her family porch trying to get the guy to come in and meet the family. And then you say, we're going to see the dad looking, and he turns around and he's Frankenstein. And there was nothing. It was like, yeah, you're going to laugh at that. So we don't need to cue you with the laugh track. We're just going to play it as if, oh, well, this is normal, because that's the conceit of the entire show.
Well, and in this one episode, they establish not only the fact that they're monstrous monsters, each one based on a classic archetype, but they also establish that their family values, are more wholesome than everybody else's, which again, this is way before family values was even an issue. It's like, and of course, that's the only way you get away with doing this kind of subversive content back in the day, is to, obviously the monsters have to be the good guys.
Yeah, I called him Fred Munster by accident. He's Fred Gwynn playing Herman Munster. So just let me correct that. But yeah, it's the party, the adult cocktail party that they get invited to, and the snobbiness of, like, who are these Munsters anyway? And the on the nose joke of, like, I hope they don't misspell their name and show them as Monster. The conceit of the show that I remember too being carried out at the masquerade party, which is they are never discovered. No one ever says, oh my God, they're monsters. There's always an explanation. I was drunk. I didn't see them clearly. It was a masquerade party. So I just thought that was how they were dressed up until the very end when Tom turns on the light, right?
Also the on the nose joke of the fact that ironically, the upper crust society is dressed as, a monster, dressed as a Frankenstein and a little Bo Peep, and so on and so on and so on.
I actually thought, when we first see the wife hosting the party, when we first see her costume, I thought, oh, she's Bo Peep, and that's going to be a thing. that she'll also be, setting her up to not like the Munsters because they dressed alike. And then that wasn't it. She was like Marie Antoinette or
Yeah, I
something.
think
And
so. Yeah.
yeah, some real dated costumes though. Tom and Marilyn dressed as John Alden and Priscilla with no explanation because everybody in the audience knows John Alden and Priscilla. I had to look it up. Did you know what
Nope.
they are?
Yeah.
Some of the first residents of Plymouth Rock, of Plymouth Colony.
I did recognize that they were in old pilgrim costumes or what have you.
Yeah. So they're famous pilgrims, I guess.
I also, as you know, Tom, we turns out after nearly 2,000 episodes of Scam Nation and The Modern Rogue, I kind of can't stop looking at the production side of things, and you notice little things like 1964. Okay, those are actually. You'll notice that the shadows are extra harsh. You'll notice that this was shot on film but broadcast on video. You could see the video film or the film artifacts on all that stuff. I was fascinated by the quality of the sound because nobody had cardioid mics on their body. So like the moments where like there's wind happening, I'm like, how on earth did you do that and not mess up the...
I think it all must have been retract. That's my guess.
I actually went down a rabbit hole and found out that using ADR was very sparing during this time.
Oh, okay. All right.
So it like when you get to the 70s, for example, famously in the movie Flash Gordon, the guy who played Flash Gordon couldn't make it to the ADR session. It took 2 days. So they literally, every time you hear Flash Gordon talking, it's not the actor, it's somebody else because he couldn't make it that day. And I don't know, man. This was a trip. I loved it. There was one moment I wish I could remember the joke. I lost it, but I full on burst out laughing out loud alone in a room at one point just because the timing was too perfect on one joke or other.
And it was an avalanche of those jokes, so that the ones that are super dumb, you don't even care because 3 others have happened in the time you took to think about how dumb one of the jokes was. Like they just keep coming.
There's something adorable. I don't know. Maybe I'm just in love with Fred Gwynn, but there's something adorable about the whole family and the setup.
Well, that premise is just still works so well. Of it's a typical family. They just happen to be monsters, and they don't think there's anything weird with that, right? They're not going for the obvious, which is like, oh, we're hated by society. They're like, no, we're just normal people. We just, happen to be monsters.
I mean,
and we don't like, and the key is like, and we don't like being treated badly, and we deserve to be treated well, right?
Meanwhile, we are kind to everyone around us.
Exactly. Yeah.
To the standards of our community,
right.
We made it nice and rainy and miserable for you. Why are you complaining?
Why would you be upset with that? But every once in a while, the era pokes its head out. The other time was when Grandpa was using his potions to create his costume, which hilariously, he still just looks like Grandpa in a costume, even though the conceit was that he was using a potion to transform himself. And when he comes up and he's Napoleon, I didn't write it down, but he explains like, oh, it was easy. I just combined Marlon Brando, some other actor, and some other historical figure. And I'm like, oh, that joke killed right then. Right, because Marlon Brando was top of his game. Like he was a super heartthrob at the time, and now I'm like, I can't even remember the other actor that he mentioned.
I think it was 2 historical figures, and then Marlon Brando was the third.
Maybe it was just one. I thought one of them was an actor, but I didn't catch the historical reference then.
But the it's so funny viewed through the lens of 60 years later. 60 years, Tom. Viewed through the lens 60 years later, I'm like, oh, you're combining large language models to create a character. Okay,
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Also, did you catch So we had the somewhat saucy opening scene, right, on the porch. Then we have the other end of that where she's kind of put off by his family and so gives him the brush off on the porch and intentionally sends him in the room to see his family. It's the first time we have any sense that Marilyn thinks there's something odd about her aunt and uncle, who she loves very much and has no problem with, but she's like, "Oh, I know this will freak him out." And she's like, "Yeah, just go in there and turn on the light." However, did you catch at the party when Herman goes up to introduce himself to Tom's dad? There's a woman who's kind of dressed as, I don't know, Cleopatra or something, or let's see, how do they credit her? A harem girl. And she is talking exclusively to the dad with the chairs turned away from the rest of the party. He introduces her as Miss Hanson, I think. And she, in a very breathy voice, says, "Nice to meet you." And that's it. I'm like, where is this leading? Is she like also a Munster? Is she a historical figure that's still alive? No. I think that scene was supposed to imply that Tom's dad was having an affair.
That does track because Tom's dad was not portrayed as being in a happy marriage. And in fact, they even had a one-liner where it's like something hookup reference. It's like, well, it's been a minute since that. One of those old-timey things.
Yeah. So even if it wasn't as far as an affair, it was clear like dad's paying more attention to this young girl dressed as a harem girl than he is to anyone else at the party. But they didn't dwell on it. They didn't have him say, "This is my secretary," which would have been like okay, I clearly get it. There's something subtle about the Munsters that I did not remember. It's pretty good.
That's the right word, is the subtlety. Like there are layers. Like we watched it when we were young, and it never occurred to us that this was a very, very subtle commentary on societal status. It's a status game.
Yeah.
And the Munsters are not playing that game. They're flat out good, wholesome people who, if anybody looked them straight in the eye, would realize that all the people that they're demonizing in their day-to-day life, if it weren't for the Irish or the whatevers and so on, then everything would be great. Like, no, they are the Irish. And they have that wonderful, joyful innocence of just like, "Oh, is that a thing? We didn't know. We're just good people." And there's something joyous about it that I'll be curious, and maybe we can add something to the full experience here. Because remember, Rob Zombie did a version of the Munsters for Netflix, I think, or whatever. I wonder if any of that subtle cultural commentary survived through that iteration of it.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I know. Ambassador Domo just pointed out that Charles de Gaulle was the historical figure.
Yes.
But I don't remember the third person. There was the third person too.
No. It was. I did blank.
Marlon Brando, something, and Charles de Gaulle.
Yeah.
But thank you, Ambassador Domo. And Charles de Gaulle was not a historical person at the time. He was still current.
Was he really?
He was the guy. He was the French premier that restored France post-war. I believe he was still alive, but he had fallen out of government.
Yes, this would have been like, this came out like 2 years after Algeria finally got independence from France.
Yeah, he was put out of power in 1959. And he died in 1969. So he's still alive, but he'd been out of power for 5 years.
So it was a classic reference, a current reference, and a famous actor.
Yeah, it would be like making a joke about Angela Merkel today.
Man, I mean, I don't want to heap too much praise on this and act like it's, a work of genius, but I was really delighted and surprised by how much I liked it and how good it was, and on so many levels. I mean, I
unironically enjoyed this without nostalgia. There was also nostalgia, but I was like, no, this is good. This is fun.
Amos is bringing up the Simple B plot. What was the Simple B plot? Jump in here.
Oh,
Amos.
it was the daycare, or not daycare, the babysitter.
Oh, that's right. That's right. The babysitter freaking out about the wolf boy.
Mm-hmm. But almost not freaking out about the wolf boy. It was like, it just alluded to it, but she was timid, but never actually scared.
Yeah. More freaked out about the cobwebs than anything else, really.
She's sitting in a chair, and then suddenly she just has cobwebs on her lap at one point.
Sure. Well, and for anybody who did babysitting as a teenager, it's like, yep, comes with the territory. Just another gig.
Yep.
Paulus claims that de Gaulle was still president of France at the time. That's not what I saw when I looked it up, but just in case, your mileage may vary. The point is, he was still relevant.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the simplicity of this whole thing.
Amos, had you ever seen the Munsters before this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. This show is one of the suggestions that I put in there. I was the one that actually wrote that down in there. So.
He was president of France till he died. So yeah, that would have been.
Wow. I love the Munsters. I didn't understand why I liked it so much, and then watching this episode was like, oh, because it's simple, and there's, as you said, there's layers to it, but it's all just kind of laid bare. It's just, here it is. Here's the story, and here's the.
It's not pretentious in any way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it didn't require you to think a whole lot about the show either, and it's still enjoyable.
Well, and okay, so if this came out 1964, it makes sense that there would be kind of echoes of a very simple French farce in it, where everybody's kind of overplaying their role, and we know this person knows this thing, but the other person doesn't know the other thing. We later see that in the English farce of Toast of London and so on. But for right now, man, I'm looking forward to the ultimate of this experience.
Indeed, me too. That will be Herman the Rookie. So obviously around Herman Munster, potentially a sports story if he's the rookie. Does Herman join a baseball team, perhaps? The Yankees? I don't know. We'll find out when we watch the highest rated episode of the Munsters, season 1, episode 29. So mere 3 episodes away from the finale of that season. Herman the Rookie, the ultimate episode of the Munsters. That's what we will watch next week. Thank you for joining us for the full experience. If you're a patron, you get these earlier. Patreon.com/Cordkillers. Go become a patron right now if you haven't already. And if you have, thank you very much. We will give you the full experience in ultimate style next time. Talk to you then.